I have seen 1,000 things, 1,000 minds, and what they bring to this world and to this home. But where I stand, well, I don't know.
There are over 5,000 memorials for the First World War scattered across Australia. It seems like every town and every suburb has some kind of memorial, a park, an honour board, a requisitioned tank or gun, a street name, a drinking fountain or a hall. The majority of memorials take the form of monuments, most typically an obelisk, often mounted by a solitary soldier. Some of these stone memorials can be overlooked in the rush of modern traffic and development. Some look unkempt, others are well maintained. Some were modest in scale, others grand, yet collectively they represent an important period in the history of Australia, one that continues to have relevance on our lives today.
At the Anzac Memorial we see the opportunity for reflection on the tragedy of war. We see lots of symbolism around it that would speak very quickly and clearly to you of commemoration.
Monuments grew with great rapidity in the years following the war, and on the whole had two aims. One was to express grief and remembrance for suffering in war just gone, and the other to express values and hope for a better world, for peace, victory, the community, the land and nation of Australia as a whole.
Certainly we do have, a memorial in every country town, in every suburb that existed back in that time. Not only is there the widespread experience, and so every town and every suburb is likely to have had families affected, well, not likely, will have had families affected. Consequently, you'd want to meet that in the same way that your neighbouring town is doing. The memorials had to express hope in some way, and that means also that the ceremonies that occurred at them needed to also find a way of expressing that, acknowledging the grief, but also bringing people together and giving them hope for the future. So you often find that is an element of what we're looking at, or it's an element of what we hear about and learn about from reading of the ceremonies that occurred back then.
Well, you can understand it because of the fact that those who served, for instance, those who were killed, were buried overseas, not here in Australia. So there was a need for a local memorial to mourn and to grieve, but also to recognise a huge effort for a small young nation.
He saw the ships come in. He saw the endless wave of men. He felt the sting of the sea. He didn't know what war would be. And he had no place to hide, but his mates were at his side. Through the filth and mud and rain, through the endless days, come back again.
Certainly you've got the Great War, an extraordinary escalation in the scale of death and mass grief and a desire to value the extraordinary contribution of those who sacrificed themselves for the nation. And you see war memorials with names on it for every participant in country.
Pictures of a girl.
There are many debates as to how and who should be honoured when, and people will always disagree on that. I think it's appropriate that the living soldiers were honoured because some of them came back damaged. Some came back blind, some came back amputees, some were shell-shocked and suffered great trauma. So I think it's only appropriate that those who carried a legacy and made a great sacrifice should be remembered.
And he was a lovely man. He never got drunk. Ever got drunk. He got married. So he's the pain, and he had this lovely girlfriend. We got photos of her, but we never met her. And when he was in great pain, he'd come home to his mum. And he had a little back room. Jeffrey remembers the back room, and he would, and then he'd just sit there in this merry, what's name, and he'd sing a song. You probably know and heard it. We'll build a little nest somewhere in the west, and I get terribly upset when I hear it.
Resurrect the community, you've got to help the community pull together and either rebuild itself physically, as would have been more the case across Europe, or rebuild itself emotionally, spiritually, and even nationally. That there's an expectation here that we've got to pull together and pull ourselves out of what we've just been through. We learn from it. We hope that it doesn't happen again, but as we know, there was a great tragedy to follow.